Today, we're talking about Gaurav, a 28-year-old professional earning 145,000 per month, yet finding himself in a situation where, despite a seemingly decent salary, he is completely buried under multiple loan EMIs and has no savings left at the end of the month. Every month, Gaurav receives his paycheck, but before he can even think about investing for the future, building an emergency fund, or simply setting aside a small amount for unexpected expenses, the entirety of his income is consumed by obligations that feel unavoidable. These obligations are a mix of formal and informal financial commitments, car loans, personal loans, borrowed money from friends and family, credit card dues, and everyday living expenses such as rent, groceries, utilities, commuting costs, and occasional social outings. Each EMI feels like a mandatory ticket to financial survival, and each payment is non-negotiable, leaving no breathing room to plan ahead or even take a short financial pause. Gaurav's situation is not unique. It is emblematic of a larger, often silent crisis among young professionals who enter the workforce with optimism and aspirations, only to discover that the moment their first salary lands in their bank account, it is almost immediately claimed by debts and recurring obligations. The psychological impact is equally significant, the sense of never truly owning one's income, feeling perpetually behind despite hard work, and living paycheck to paycheck creates a mental burden that compounds over time. For Gaurav, weekends and holidays no longer carry the same joy because there is always a nagging worry about how the next month's EMIs will be managed, or if an unexpected expense, like medical bills or a home repair, will tip his delicate financial balance into crisis. The challenge extends beyond the numbers. It is a question of priorities, of delayed gratification, and of learning to manage a lifestyle within means that often feel constricted. He dreams of one day saving for a home, traveling, or investing in mutual funds or retirement plans, but these ambitions seem like distant luxuries when the immediate reality is dominated by urgent financial responsibilities. Even attempts at budgeting can feel like a game with no winners, as unplanned expenses arise with clockwork precision, eroding any minor savings he might have hoped to accumulate. There is also the subtle social dimension of the stress. Observing peers who appear to manage better or live with more financial freedom can amplify feelings of inadequacy or frustration, making the treadmill of salary and obligations feel not just exhausting but almost unfair. Gaurav's predicament underscores a crucial lesson: earning a steady income does not automatically translate to financial security, and being trapped in a cycle of debt can happen to anyone, regardless of how disciplined or hardworking they might be. It illustrates the importance of early financial literacy, disciplined spending, and planning for contingencies, because without these tools, even a reasonable salary can feel like it disappears into a black hole of monthly commitments. Moreover, this scenario is not just about money, it's about control over one's life choices. When every rupee is allocated to paying off prior commitments, the freedom to make meaningful life decisions, whether it's investing in education, taking a career risk, or enjoying leisure activities, becomes severely limited. The cumulative effect of this cycle can lead to stress, anxiety, and a creeping sense of helplessness, which can further impact productivity, personal relationships, and overall well-being. Gaurav's story is, therefore, a mirror reflecting the lived reality of countless young professionals who struggle silently, trying to balance aspirations with obligations, dreaming of financial freedom while being constrained by the very income meant to empower them. It highlights the stark truth that money management is not only about earning more, but about controlling outflows, creating buffers, and making conscious choices to avoid being swallowed by debt. because without that awareness, a steady salary, no matter how decent it may seem on paper, can quickly turn into a treadmill from which there is no escape. Gaurav's experience reminds us that financial challenges are multidimensional. They are about discipline, mindset, planning, and sometimes even lifestyle adjustments. And navigating this landscape successfully requires not just earning, but intentional, strategic management of every rupee that comes in and goes out, ensuring that the hard work of earning does not vanish without leaving behind security, progress, or peace of mind. When we break down Gaurav's finances, a pattern emerges that is both revealing and cautionary. The numbers on a salary slip are never just figures, they directly reflect the kind of life one can lead, the choices one can make, and the stress one carries. Gaurav earns 45,000 a month, which on paper may seem sufficient for a young professional starting out. Yet the reality is that almost every rupee of that income is already claimed before it even arrives in his bank account, swallowed by a combination of fixed obligations and routine expenses that leave no margin for growth or security. The top line figure of his salary isn't the problem. The issue lies in how the outflows have been structured and prioritized, creating a situation where opportunity never gets a chance to knock. Each month, he dutifully pays his car loan, personal loans, credit card dues, and small debts borrowed from friends or family, followed by essential day-to-day expenses such as rent, groceries, utilities, commuting, and occasional leisure. These obligations, while necessary at some level, collectively absorb his entire paycheck, leaving zero room for discretionary spending, emergency savings, or investments that could compound over time to create financial stability. This illustrates a critical lesson about money management. It's not only about how much you earn, but more importantly, about how much freedom your income actually affords you after obligations are met. For Gaurav, the stress of constantly meeting due dates becomes a routine, and the feeling of financial suffocation is reinforced month after month. He may earn more in the future, but if the pattern of prioritizing high-cost loans, inflated lifestyle choices, and short-term comforts continues, even a higher salary could still be fully consumed by obligations, leaving him trapped in the same treadmill. What makes the situation more striking is that this scenario is not uncommon. Many young professionals fall into the same trap of having their income pre-committed to liabilities that grow faster than their earnings, whether due to an attractive vehicle purchase, a tempting lifestyle upgrade, or multiple personal loans taken without fully accounting for long-term repayment capability. The psychological impact is significant. It fosters a sense of scarcity and frustration, eroding confidence in one's ability to plan for the future and creating a cycle where even small attempts at financial improvement feel undermined by existing commitments. The crux of the problem is that fixed obligations, when unmanaged, act like silent income eaters. They turn what should be financial freedom into an invisible cage. Income becomes reactive rather than proactive. It no longer enables choice, but instead mandates survival. 6. Gaurav's story exemplifies this perfectly. Despite earning a seemingly respectable amount, his finances are dictated not by ambition or future planning, but by past decisions and rigid commitments that leave no room for opportunity or security. This demonstrates why financial literacy and conscious planning are essential early on. Before obligations grow to a size that consumes all income, it's not just about reducing spending, it's about aligning payments with long-term goals, making strategic lifestyle choices, and prioritizing commitments that truly add value rather than creating invisible chains. The lesson here extends beyond Gaurav. For anyone navigating their early career or first independent income, It is crucial to recognize that income alone does not create wealth or freedom. It is the leftover, the portion of earnings that remains after obligations, that holds the power to transform life. By understanding where money goes, what commitments are necessary, and which expenditures can be controlled or delayed, one can prevent the subtle but relentless creep of debt and high fixed costs from swallowing the paycheck entirely. Gaurav's predicament shows that when obligations outpace strategic planning, the income's potential is lost, leaving not only zero savings but also a growing sense of financial anxiety. In essence, the top line may look healthy, but the bottom line, freedom, security, and the ability to act on opportunity, is what truly matters. Managing finances effectively is therefore less about earning more and more about ensuring that each rupee is intentionally directed toward both necessary payments and future building opportunities, so that income becomes a tool for freedom rather than a source of stress. Gaurav's story is a mirror for many, highlighting that financial control is earned not just through salary, but through conscious allocation, disciplined repayment, and a clear understanding of which expenses enhance life and which quietly consume it, leaving a paycheck that could be a foundation for growth instead as a disappearing mirage. Anchor then spends time with Gaurav to analyze his financial situation, not to judge or criticize, but to understand and uncover the underlying patterns that have brought him to a point where his salary, despite being decent on paper, disappears almost entirely into obligations before he has a chance to build savings or invest in the future. The first step in any meaningful financial turnaround is clarity. A detailed, honest assessment of exactly where every rupee is going each month, because without that knowledge, it's impossible to make conscious decisions or identify opportunities for improvement. When Gaurav lays out his expenses, it becomes clear that the bulk of his salary is swallowed by fixed monthly costs such as car loans, personal loans, credit card dues, and borrowed money that must be repaid alongside essential day-to-day living expenses like rent, groceries, utilities, commuting, and occasional discretionary spending. There is almost nothing left over for savings, emergency funds, or investments, which compounds the stress and makes him vulnerable to any unexpected financial shock. This lack of buffer is one of the biggest leaks in his financial system, and it illustrates a common problem for many young professionals. When obligations grow faster than income, even a well-earning individual can feel trapped, living paycheck to paycheck without a sense of real progress. Anchor points out that the goal here is not to assign guilt or shame, but to create awareness. A paycheck is a tool, a means to enable security, growth, and freedom, but when commitments and lifestyle choices consume every rupee, it transforms that tool into a shackle, a constant reminder of what one owes rather than what one can achieve. By mapping out Gaurav's income and expenditures in detail, the patterns of financial leakage become evident. High-cost EMIs that were taken on without fully considering long-term repayment capacity, daily expenses that creep up due to convenience or habit, and an absence of systematic saving that prevents money from working for him. Once these leaks are identified, Anchor can guide Gaurav in understanding that financial turnaround is less about earning more and more about restructuring obligations, prioritizing critical payments, and deliberately allocating even small amounts toward future goals. Clarity allows him to see that even minor adjustments, for example, reducing discretionary spending, negotiating loan terms, or consolidating debt, can free up incremental funds that begin to restore control over his finances. It's about creating a system where income becomes a source of empowerment rather than anxiety, a tool to achieve aspirations rather than a reminder of limitations. This process also emphasizes the importance of an emergency fund, a financial cushion that absorbs shocks and prevents a single unforeseen event from derailing progress, and of setting aside funds for long term goals such as investments, retirement, or wealth building instruments that grow over time. Anchor helps Gaurav realize that awareness itself is liberating. Once you see the flow of money clearly, you can make informed decisions instead of reacting out of habit, peer pressure, or immediate need. The episode highlights that financial freedom is not about extravagance or sudden windfalls. It's about understanding obligations, identifying leaks, and systematically converting income from a shackle into a lever for life goals. Gaurav begins to appreciate that this is not a moral failing but a structural reality, one that many people face silently, believing that they are somehow failing when, in truth, they simply lack the clarity and tools to manage their money effectively. By the end of the analysis, the focus shifts from guilt to action, from seeing a paycheck as a burden to seeing it as a set of choices that, when managed consciously, can open doors rather than close them. Every rupee now has a purpose, and the exercise teaches that control is possible even in seemingly tight circumstances. The narrative also stresses that without clarity, people often underestimate the power of small, deliberate changes by tracking expenses, understanding obligations, and planning ahead. Gaurav can begin to shift his financial reality step by step. The broader lesson is clear: income is never just a number, and a paycheck is never just money. It is a tool that can either enslave or liberate, depending on how intentionally it is managed. For Gaurav, this episode is a turning point, demonstrating that even in situations where every rupee seems accounted for, awareness, prioritization, and deliberate action can convert financial stress into structured progress, showing that no matter how tight the present may feel, a path toward freedom, stability, and growth is always possible with clarity, planning, and consistent effort. Finally, Wariku and Gaurav sit down to create an actionable financial plan, approaching the situation not with judgment or blame, but with a clear focus on practical steps that can gradually transform Gaurav's financial reality from constant stress to structured progress. They begin by emphasizing the importance of building a small emergency fund, even if it starts with just a few thousand rupees, because this buffer is the foundation of financial stability and a safety net against unexpected expenses such as medical bills, home repairs, or sudden car maintenance. By having this fund in place, Gaurav can begin to feel some control over his money rather than being perpetually reactive to crises, and even small savings can have a psychologically powerful effect by creating a sense of security. Once the emergency fund is prioritized, the next focus is on examining unnecessary or avoidable costs, both big and small, which silently drain income each month. Together, they identify discretionary spending habits, subscriptions that are underused, high-cost conveniences, and lifestyle choices that add little value relative to their cost. This stage is not about cutting all joy out of life, but about distinguishing between expenses that serve a purpose and those that quietly sabotage long-term stability. Simultaneously, they analyze Gaurav's existing debt, particularly higher interest obligations such as credit cards or personal loans with steep EMIs. By consolidating these debts where possible, renegotiating terms, or strategically prioritizing repayments based on interest rates, 6. Gaurav can reduce the pressure of compounding interest that eats into future income, freeing up money that can instead go towards savings and planned investments. Creating a realistic repayment schedule is key. One that fits within his current cash flow, is achievable, and does not require extreme sacrifices because the goal is sustainable progress rather than quick fixes that risk failure. The conversation repeatedly returns to the principle that this process is not about instant wealth or overnight transformation. Rather, it is about creating breathing room in day to day finances, restoring control, and providing a clear roadmap that gradually shifts Gaurav from surviving paycheck to living with intention and purpose. Importantly, Warikyu underscores that a massive salary is not a prerequisite for meaningful change. What matters far more are planning, discipline, and patience, qualities that allow someone to systematically allocate resources, track progress, and build momentum over time. Even with zero savings and tight finances, incremental steps can compound into real progress, demonstrating that financial growth is less about sudden windfalls and more about consistent, deliberate action. The episode highlights how structuring income intentionally transforms money from a source of stress into a tool for empowerment, showing that clarity, strategy, and prioritization can turn what once felt like a suffocating paycheck into a manageable framework for financial improvement. Each part of the plan, emergency funds, cost reduction, debt consolidation, and repayment scheduling, works together synergistically, not in isolation, so that the burden of obligations gradually lessens while confidence and agency increase. Beyond numbers, the process also reshapes mindset, teaching that money should serve life goals rather than dictate them, and that slow, steady, intentional steps toward financial security are far more effective and sustainable than impulsive decisions or reactive measures. Gaurav's experience serves as a powerful reminder that financial stress is not a permanent state, and that with a thoughtful approach, even someone who feels trapped by loans, EMIs, and tight budgets can create room to breathe, plan, and grow. By the end of the exercise, the overarching lesson is clear. Financial transformation begins not with extraordinary resources, but with ordinary actions applied consistently. And understanding that every rupee has a purpose, every choice matters, and every small step taken with discipline and patience moves one closer to control, freedom, and the ability to live life on one's own terms. This episode encapsulates the idea that no matter how constrained your finances appear, adopting a smarter strategy and following a structured plan can turn pressure into progress, fear into confidence, and confusion into clarity, demonstrating that financial stability and intentional living are achievable goals even from a starting point of zero savings and tight budgets.